People love to say that women's hockey is not physical, so let's talk about the first Gordie Howe hat trick, which is when a player scores a goal, an assist, and has a fight in the same game in the PWHL's history. Welcome back to the 25 Days of Sportsmas, the series where every day I'm telling you a story that I think would get you into sports for the first time. If you're not familiar with the PWHL, it's the Professional Women's Hockey League. We are in the second season of this league, and while it is not the first professional women's hockey league to ever exist, the rules do allow for a lot more physical play than we've previously seen in women's hockey. During only the second month of the league, we had a real fist fight. On February 20th, the Boston Fleet were going up against the Ottawa Charge. And during this game, Jill Saulnier, who was playing for the Boston Fleet, and Teresa Vanosheva, who was playing for the Ottawa Charge, were getting pretty physical on the ice. During gameplay, it's possible that Jill may have cross-checked Teresa twice. And at a certain point, Teresa was over it, so when she got back up off the ice, she snatched Jill's stick and threw it to the ground. Jill said that at that point, she knew the game was on, and so she started throwing punches. Now, in the NHL, you're used to seeing players throw their gloves on the ice like a medieval gauntlet. However, in women's hockey, we don't see them take their gloves off, and that's because their helmets have a full cage on them. So, as Jill said, you would look pretty silly to throw your gloves on the ice and then bare-knuckle punch a metal cage. However, with gloves on, we saw punches thrown so much that those helmets were starting to move. And eventually, these players were separated, as they always are in hockey fights, but not before the full stadium of fans were on their feet shouting with the same amount of bloodlust you would see in an NHL stadium. Both of these players did receive a 2-minute penalty and headed to the penalty box. But after Teresa got back on the ice having served her timeout, she scored with just 3 seconds left in the game, not only helping the Ottawa Charge take that win home, but making herself the first player to record a Gordie Howe hat trick in the PWHL, which again is when a player has an assist, a goal, and a fight in the same game. This fight was so important to the PWHL for a number of reasons. One, the PWHL did have to clarify their rules, stating that now players will receive a 5-minute major for fighting. But two, it was one of the most viral moments of this league last year. And that's because it showed that women's sports are just as aggressive and intense as men's sports are. And women's hockey in particular has a misconception of not being that aggressive. The PWHL's rules do allow for more physical gameplay than previous women's hockey leagues. However, this wasn't the first or the last time that we saw a fight in women's hockey. There was a full brawl between Team USA and Team Canada ahead of the 2014 Olympics. There have been fights on ice between Team USA and Team Canada. And there continue to be more and more physical moments in the PWHL itself. But the reason this fight in particular was so important was because of how much attention it got online. And in this moment, we saw a change in the understanding of women's hockey, and the fact that it is still an incredibly physical game, and that these athletes are incredibly intense players. So if you've never watched the PWHL before because you thought it wasn't as intense as other hockey games, hopefully this changes your mind a little bit. And you can start watching the PWHL season right now, and start finding some of your favorite players before they head to the 2026 Olympics. Be sure to follow along and come back tomorrow for the next day of Sportsmas.